So the topic I keep coming back to is just how bad the writing was in Split Fiction. I know I spend most of my fully Ramblomatic review banging on that drum, but the gameplay didn't have much to complain about, and I've got to get my jollies in somewhere. It was bad enough that it feels like we could probably learn a lot by taking a closer look and breaking down some specifics. So before we go on, there's going to be no getting away from spoilers, so consider this your token warning. It's a game worth playing, if you liked It Takes Two. It's just the characters that mandolin my taint. Said characters are Zoe and Mio, two amateur writers who get put inside a prototype virtual world on the promise of a publishing contract and who end up having to live through each other's stories. The central dynamic between them is that they're complete opposites in about the most cliched ways imaginable. One's an extrovert, one's an introvert, one's a country girl, one's a city girl. They establish this when Zoe delivers the line, "You're from the city, aren't you?" with no further specification, and over the course of the story the two girls learn to work together and become friends. Pretty standard arc for this sort of pairing, and a little disappointing after the central dynamic of It Takes Two, i.e. divorcing spouses having to reacquaint themselves with each other, was a lot more interesting, even if the dialogue wasn't that much better. But the more we learn about Zoe and Mio, the more annoying they get. It's particularly grating the way they both keep reacting with incredulity to the utterly pedestrian sci-fi and fantasy concepts they are confronted with from their counterpart's mind. Zoe keeps giving Mio shit for her sci-fi ideas being violent and stressful, but they spend all their time in Zoe's stories fighting dragons and ogres. And the way they keep using dialogue to directly and indirectly praise their own game's creativity is a big part of what makes it all come across so insufferably smug. But things get worse later when we learn that both girls have secret traumas, and it turns out Mio's father is terminally ill and she's his only caregiver. And I immediately asked what the fuck she was doing here then, at this tech demonstration, and not by his side, changing his catheter bags. At this I started disliking Mio as a person, and not just from the face value smug quips and cliched retorts, because Mio makes her dad's pain all about herself. The game keeps trying to make us pity her, with lines like, "Oh, you don't know what it's like to go through that all alone. Bitch, your dad is the one who is alone right now. You're gallivanting around in Dream World with your British friend." And in the epilogue of the game, we see Mio standing over her dad's grave, when last we knew he was still alive. And whether or not this was the intention, what I took from that was that her dad tragically died alone while she was off having the big adventure, and she got over it more or less instantly. That was the second funniest part, after the revelation that the whole reason Mio went into writing hack sci-fi was to help pay her dad's bills. And I was like, that was your fucking plan? Do you know how hard it is to even earn a living as a genre fiction writer, let alone pay exorbitant medical costs? This was one of many moments that signaled to me that these characters who were supposed to be authors didn't actually know the first thing about writing fiction. Another one was when characters and creatures keep showing up very obviously based on figures in the author's life in the most on-the-nose manner imaginable, and the protagonists express surprise at the notion that one's writing might reflect one's subconscious on certain levels. But I could go on about the broad strokes and how the very core of the plot is built upon the extremely shaky foundation of its two authors having such brilliant ideas that the Elon Musk-type villain invested literal millions into creating a machine to steal them. I wanted to get into specifics, though we might go over some fundamentals of dialogue writing. To that end, I've chosen a scene, more or less at random, so that I can transcribe it and we can weed out all the problems. This is a scene late in the game, right after the boss fight with Mio's evil subconscious self, whom she has to beat up to become a fully rounded individual in a very Persona 4-y sort of way. Here's the conversation that takes place as the dust settles. When the scene starts, Mio is in a kneeling fetal position, and we might assume she's undergoing some kind of emotional breakdown. That gets refuted when the camera comes around, and we and Zoe discover that Mio is smiling in relief, which could have been a nice, subtle little moment, but then they have to ruin it by having her confirm aloud that she's feeling good. Marty said to me while playing this game that he thinks everything these days is written with the assumption that the viewer is distracting themselves with their phone the whole way through, and needs everything constantly spelled out and restated, but I still think showing is preferable to telling, or indeed showing and telling. Zoe, so she's finally gone. Mio, yeah. Zoe, well good for you, cause that dark Mio, total party pooper. In accordance with the insufferable habit of modern screenwriting, the dialogue attempts to break the emotional tension with a joke. Obnoxious in itself, but it might have helped if Zoe's line had actually been a joke, rather than a slightly facetious reframing of events. I went over the difference between facetious quips and actual jokes back in extra punctuation. In this case, I guess you could maybe read it as Zoe sarcastically saying that Mio's subconscious isn't exactly a barrel of laughs even without her evil self in it, but that seems like it would be an unwelcome comment. Mio, I couldn't have done this without you, Zoe, thank you. Hugs her lingeringly. Zoe, oh, yeah, okay, sure, take your time. We have a bit of tonal clash here, don't we? As I said, this scene is near the end of the game, and in some ways the culmination of Mio's character arc, so she's being uncharacteristically open with her feelings. Zoe, on the other hand, is playing it like awkward comedy. Her demeanour and statements suggest she thinks Mio is being overly forward. Now, Zoe hasn't gone through her subconscious and fixed her personality yet. That's what happens in the next mission. But I still think we're shitting on Mio's big emotional moment here. Mio. So this is what it feels like, eh? Zoe. Conquering your inner demons? You know, there's a line in Back to the Future 3 that's always bothered me as a writer. When Marty McFly goes back to the Old West wearing a hot pink cowboy costume that 1950s Doc Brown got for him, the 1980s Doc Brown asks him, "What idiot dressed you like that?" To which Marty replies, "You did, LOL." But why would Doc Brown phrase it that way? Does he think Marty McFly needs help getting dressed? He's not that young. Why would he ask, "What idiot dressed you like that?" instead of, "Why did you dress like that, you idiot?" The only reason he says it like he does is to act as a feed line for the gag. And ever since I noticed that, it's always irked me when characters say something that it makes no sense for them to say, except as a feed for the other character's next line. And that's what Zoe's line is here. Mio's line is vague enough that I think most of us would ask her to clarify what she means rather than take a stab, one that, again, awkwardly re-establishes the situation in a very telling not showing kind of way. Zoe only does so to allow Mio to correct her with this fucking sledgehammer of a line. Mio, having a friend. And if they're taking nominations for this year's Most Awkwardly on the Nose award, this will be my hot tip, after my blackheads. Just in case it wasn't painfully obvious from the very moment these ladies first interacted that they would be friends by the end of the game helpfully smashes you over the head with it. So, how would I rewrite this scene? Well, I think the main issue running through all of Split Fiction's writing is that there's too much of it. One of my favourite pieces of writing advice is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's famous quote, "Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." What are the goals of this scene? Establish that Mio is happy, grateful to Zoe, and now considers her a friend. I'm pretty sure we can achieve all of that with 90% of the words stripped out. Here's my take. Zoe, are you okay? Mio, smiling. Yeah. Zoe, do you need anything? Mio hugs her lingeringly. Bam! 10 seconds in and out. My intention is that the hug is Mio's answer to Zoe's question, "Do you need anything?" Yes, I need you. You helped me. You are my friend. None of which actually needs to be said, if you frame the action right. Honestly though, I don't think how they should have written this content is of much value after the fact, and if I were rewriting the entire game, I might not have included this scene at all. I'm sure all the points it brings across would have already been adequately established by all the full frontal lesbian sex scenes.
This video is brought to you by Stygian Outer Gods, the Lovecraftian survival horror RPG filled with terror, suspense, and a main character named Jack, and hey, that's my name. Make your way through Kingsport, a dark and hostile town that challenges your very existence. Craft items, solve puzzles, and explore the dark corners of the settlement as you unravel the mysteries that lie deep within, including what happened to your precious dog Cookie. Wait, my actual dog is Cookie. Is my dog in this game? Because choose whether to sneak through the shadows and avoid the monstrosities that roam the streets or confront them head on with whatever weapon you manage to scrounge up. But be careful of Jack's sanity as he's almost out of coffee and his Ernest goes to jail mug needs to be washed. Wait, exposure to these disturbing and otherworldly encounters could lead to disastrous results. How did they know about my mug? Stygian Outer Gods hits PC Early Access on April 14th with a full PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S release set for 2026. Head on over to the Steam link below to wishlist the game today.